All right, diving in. Welcome to your very own deep dive. This time, we're going deep on some pretty heavy stuff. You know, criticism, competition, and just plain overcoming tough challenges.
Yeah.
And it's all connected to this word drub. Like, think about getting, I don't know, completely destroyed in a game or just like ripped to shreds by some critic.
Oh, good idea.
And what we have here is, it's really interesting, actually. We've got, like, the official dictionary definition of drub, but then we also have, like, your own personal stories.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just say, those are pretty far from ordinary.
Well, what really stands out to me is how all of these ideas, criticism and setbacks, they're all like woven together in your life.
Yeah.
It's not just like some abstract definition. It's how you actually dealt with all this stuff and how you came to like redefine success, but on your own terms.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the really fascinating part.
Okay, so let's jump right in.
Okay.
You mentioned this feeling of being underestimated early on in your career, especially compared to your brother's success. It's kind of like starting a race a few steps behind everyone else, right?
Yeah, it's like you're at a disadvantage right from the start.
Yeah.
And it definitely puts on a different kind of pressure.
Yeah.
But instead of letting that like define your whole journey, you turned it into fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Like all those late nights you pulled the money stuff,
Yeah.
the sacrifices. It shows like a real drive to prove something, not just to others, but like to yourself too.
Yeah, and you actually you reached your goal. You bought a condo. Talk about like a real solid measure of success.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just about getting the condo, was it?
So,
It
yeah.
was like showing everyone that you could set your mind to something and actually achieve it, even with all the doubts and feeling underestimated and all that.
Exactly. And that's a huge takeaway.
Yeah.
Figuring out your own ways to measure success instead of letting everyone else tell you what's important. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like, don't let other people's comparisons decide how you feel about yourself.
Now you have this really interesting way of talking about dealing with criticism.
Mm-hmm.
You said you absorb it like nutrients.
Yeah.
Can you maybe like walk us through a specific time when you got some tough feedback, maybe even felt a little drubbed, but somehow found a way to find those hidden nutrients and use them to grow?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, there was this one time early in my career.
Hold on to that thought. This feels like the perfect place to hit pause. We'll come back and unpack exactly how you took those hard lessons and made them into something valuable in part 2.
Sounds good.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. So I was working on this project and like my first design got like totally ripped apart by this senior colleague.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was rough. I felt pretty drubbed, to be honest.
Yeah, I bet.
But instead of, getting all defensive, I tried to like step back and really get what they were saying.
Okay, so you're in that moment feeling like you just got slammed with criticism. What's going through your head? Like, how do you go from feeling defensive to actually learning something from it?
Honestly, it wasn't easy. But then I remembered what my mentor told me once. They said something like, feedback is a gift, even when it's wrapped really badly. So I focused on like unwrapping it, separating the way they said it from what they were actually saying about the design.
Oh, I like that. It's so easy to get caught up in like the tone and miss the actual good stuff hidden inside. So what was the gift in this case? What did you find when you got past all that?
Well, I realized my colleague was being harsh,
Yeah.
but they really understood who we were designing for.
Okay.
Like they saw these problems that I totally missed because I was so excited about my own design. So by accepting that they knew their stuff and focusing on what they were actually saying, I could make the design way better. The final product was so much stronger.
That's a perfect example of how, even though criticism can feel like a total drubbing, it can push you to grow. You didn't just survive the critique, you used it to get better. You mentioned a time when you felt defeated after leaving a really demanding job. It's like hitting a wall after running a marathon, and you got to figure out what's next.
It was definitely a time to look inward.
Yeah.
I had to rethink my priorities and what success actually meant to me. At first, the freedom felt amazing, but then came a whole new set of challenges and like a ton of uncertainty.
It's like trading a familiar path for like a totally uncharted wilderness.
Right. Exactly.
So there's that sense of adventure, but also like you might get lost. What were some of the hardest things you faced during this like reinvention phase?
The toughest part was like getting over the fear of failing. For so long, I thought success was all about external validation, promotions, bigger paychecks, recognition from colleagues. But without that structure, I had to ask myself, what did success really mean to me? Like deep down.
That's a really deep question, and I think a lot of people struggle with that, especially when they're switching careers or going out on their own. How did you deal with that? What helped you navigate that inner wilderness?
I started by figuring out what I didn't want. Like I realized that whole corporate climb with all its pressure and competition didn't appeal to me anymore.
Okay.
I wanted more freedom to be creative and work that felt meaningful.
So you started by like clearing out the weeds so you could see what you actually wanted. I love how you're using all these nature metaphors for your journey. What were some of the like landmarks you found along the way? Any aha moments that helped you figure things out?
One big moment was realizing I didn't need all the answers right away.
Yeah,
I used to think I needed a perfect plan before doing anything.
right.
But real reinvention is more about trying things out, seeing what works.
It's about embracing the journey, right? Like all the twists and turns and discoveries instead of being fixated on the destination. You mentioned before that failure is like a bee sting. It hurts at first, but it can change you for the better. Can you tell me about a specific sting that looking back actually helped you grow or changed your perspective?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's this one business venture I was so passionate about. I was convinced it was going to be huge. Like I planned everything perfectly, got funding, built an amazing team.
You went all in, ready to take on the world.
Yeah. But then the sting came.
What
The
happened?
market just wasn't there. We totally misjudged the demand. And despite all our efforts, the whole thing just tanked.
Oh, man.
It was devastating, both financially and emotionally.
Yeah.
I felt like I had let everyone down, my team and myself.
That's rough. Like more than a bee sting, more like a whole swarm. But you talked about turning that failure into something good, like extracting venom to use for medicine. How'd you do that?
Right after it happened, it was tough to see anything good. But once things calmed down, I started looking at what went wrong. I was so focused on my own vision of success that I ignored some warning signs.
So the venom was your own blind spots, the things you missed while chasing your dream. How did you use that to move forward?
It made me way more careful about market research, like really testing my assumptions before diving in. And I learned how important it is to have a team that will challenge my ideas, not just go along with them. It was a tough lesson, but it made me a better entrepreneur.
Like building up an immunity to future stings, or at least knowing how to use the antidote.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, let's talk about those power dynamics you mentioned, both from your childhood and as an adult. You told us about a childhood friend who used to kind of bully you.
It was a classic case of someone using their size and strength to dominate others. Looking back, it was a toxic relationship that left me feeling powerless and resentful.
Like being stuck in a game where you can't win. Years later, you ran into the same guy, and he tried to give you unsolicited advice, almost like he was still trying to control you.
It was like nothing had changed. He was still playing that same role, trying to act like the wise mentor, giving me his wisdom. But this time, I was ready.
So the game had changed, and you had a different hand to play. What happened? How did you handle it?
I didn't play along. I listened to him be polite, acknowledge what he said, but didn't really engage. And then I just excused myself. It wasn't about being rude or picking a fight. It was more about realizing I didn't need his approval anymore.
It's like you finally got off that old game board where he had all the power. You moved to a whole new game with your own rules. Just walking away was powerful in itself, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was about taking back control and choosing to spend my time and energy with people who respect me and where it's a two-way street.
Now, about competition. You've shared some pretty intense stories about childhood video game battles that, let's just say, got a little out of hand. Sounds like those early experiences really shaped how you view competition.
Yeah, those gaming sessions were like a mini version of the bigger world of competition.
Yeah.
They brought out the good and the bad, the drive to be the best, the excitement of winning, but also the frustration of losing, the temptation to cheat, even like getting physical when things got heated.
Like the game screen became a battleground blurring the lines between virtual and real. Do you think those early encounters influenced how you approach competition now, like in your career or personal life?
Definitely made me cautious, like realizing how competition can get out of control if you're not careful.
Mm.
I learned to value playing fair and keeping things in perspective. It's not always about winning, no matter what. It's about striving to be your best while staying true to yourself and respecting your opponents.
It's about finding that balance between pushing yourself and recognizing that true success isn't just about finishing first, but how you play the game along the way. We've covered a lot of ground today. Absorbing criticism like nutrients, turning failure into growth, navigating power dynamics, and finding a healthier approach to competition. It's clear that you've taken the word drub and turned it into something that makes you stronger, pushes you to change, and helps you discover who you really are.
What's really impressive to me is how intentional you are with every experience. Whether it's learning from criticism, defining success your own way, or walking away from bad situations, it's that conscious effort to learn and grow that makes you stand out.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about today. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final question to ponder. You talked about learning from both criticism and failure. So, how can you use those lessons to approach future competitions in a way that brings out your best self instead of falling into those negative patterns we've all experienced?
Hmm, that's a good question. Maybe approaching competition as a chance to work together and learn from each other, focusing on personal growth and getting better at something rather than just winning. And remembering that real success is about the journey, the constant effort to become the best version of yourself.
I really appreciate you sharing your insights with us today. Your willingness to go deep on these tough topics has been truly inspiring.
It was my pleasure.
And to you, dear listener, we hope this deep dive has given you some valuable takeaways and things to think about as you navigate your own path of growth and self-discovery. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to make the most of every experience, even the ones that feel like a drubbing. Until next time.